We're in a 5-week series on James. I guess series might be putting it too strongly. We're not obligated to preach on it, but Mother Karen and I have preached this will be the third of 3 weeks to preach on this, what I think is an extraordinary letter. James, in today's reading, have you ever heard this part before, James, about the tongue being an evil and guarding your tongue and how important it is? And does it have any meaning in your life? It seems to me that in my life, today is the day when I really need to hear this. I think it's very, very relevant. So James makes 3 points about words in today's section, the 3rd chapter, verses 1 through 12. 3 points about the power of words. And he begins with just that, the idea that words themselves have power. We often don't think of it. We think we're the ones who have power, or God has power, or nature has power, winds are powerful, rains, hurricanes. But words themselves are extraordinarily powerful in our lives. Do you have any words that someone told you when you were a youngster that still resonate with you? I do, certainly. I talk to people all the time whose very lives are shaped by words they heard when they were very young. Words are used, according to James, to build up and to tear down, to bless and to curse, to teach and to mislead. He says, if we put bits in the mouths of horses and make them obey us, we guide their whole bodies. Or look at ships. They are so large that it takes a strong wind to drive them, yet they're guided by a very small rudder wherever the will of the pilot directs. So the tongue is a very small member of the body, but it boasts great exploits or great power. A horse and a bit, a huge ship and a rudder. He goes on to say, how great a forest is set ablaze by a small fire, and the tongue is a fire. The tongue is placed among our members as a world of iniquity. It stains the whole body. It sets on fire the cycle of nature and is itself set on fire by hell. The tongue is a powerful thing. No one can tame the tongue, he says. It's a restless evil, he says, full of deadly poison, he says. Now, I don't know that we spend enough time, is my whole point, well, actually James's point, I don't think we spend enough time thinking about how powerful the tongue is, how powerful our words are. We just say them any old way we want, as many times as we want. We talk all the time. Anybody else? We talk I'm a professional talker. Imagine how it sounds to me for James to say, be quiet, don't talk so much. How many of us have been victims of unkind words in our lives? How many people have we victimized with unkind words? So the first point he makes is that words are extraordinarily powerful, and we ought to pay more attention to the words that we use. The second point he makes is that you speak from who you are, but who you are can change. Like most of us, when I do premarital counseling, I talk to people all the time about this. I say, how did your parents fight? Do you remember? And they'll always say, well, my mom, she gave my dad the silent treatment. And my dad, he was a yeller, but then he got over it, you know. And when I say to them, well, interesting, tell me about the last fight you two had. And often the way that we learn to have conflict in our homes is the way we live out conflict in our lives. And it's that way about so much of our lives. So much about how you learn to live and get along in the world and be successful in the world. You were taught at an early age, either by your parents or your family of origin, or by the circumstances you found yourself in grade school or high school, or your early work environment. And you had success being the person that you learned how to be. And sometimes we learn then that we're supposed to yell and we're supposed to use words to get advantage over people or to get our way. Or that's how we learn to succeed. We bully our way through, or we don't say enough. And what James says is, you speak from who you are. It's your person that speaks, right? You learn how to do that. But who you are can change. That's his whole point. That when you become a Christian, you are transformed. And that transformation can change the way that you act and speak in the world, right? He says, does a spring pour forth from the same opening both fresh and brackish water? He says, can a fig tree yield olives? Or can a grapevine grow figs? In other words, who you are will bear the fruit in your words. But if all you know how to do, not you, but let's pick some other people who we don't like, all they know how to do, those people we don't like, is to speak out with brackish water. And yet, they could transform. And from their mouths might flow fresh water. Same with our lives and our spirits and our souls. You can transform in such a way, you can, that you can change the way you interact with the world in words. You can make new choices. I'm learning something at this advanced age. I'm learning that I learned how to be the person I am in conversation and in groups at a very early age. Right? That was my place in my family, was to be the one who talked all the time, who made all the jokes, who, tried his very best to be charming and engaging. Like, that's who I was. And once I got into the business world, I learned to be a certain way, assertive and aggressive at times, and try to but always to talk. I'm the most talkative person I know. It's so hard to be around somebody else who talks just as much, because it's all I want to do is tell them to shut up so I can talk. Right? But I am learning something at this advanced age. And I learned it from a friend of mine who's an introvert. And I said to this person, we were at some meetings together, and I said to them, how come you never talk? I'm sitting in a meeting and somebody's talking, and I'm like, ooh, I have to say something. And so I do. The point is, I have to say it whether or not it needs to be said. Whether or not somebody has already said it, I haven't heard it until I say it. You know what I'm saying? Do you know anybody like me besides me? So I am learning that I don't have to say everything that I think. Isn't that a great thing to learn at age 63? Just because I think it doesn't mean it has to be said. Because my introvert friend said to me, the reason I don't speak is it's already being said. Now, if I have something to say and it hasn't already been said, I'll say it. I thought, well, that is so weird. Geez, so dumb. How can you... Anyway, I want to tell you a story that just this week, I got a couple stories for you. Just this week, I had a chance to practice this. There was a guy I used to work with a long time ago. His name was Matt, and he's much younger than I am. But when I was in business, he came to work for us, and he sat in the back and he did inventory. That was his job. And all day long, he was kind of sitting at this desk, and he listened to the radio. And he was the first person I ever knew to listen to Rush Limbaugh. The first one ever. This is in the 80s, right? And I didn't know what that was. I was like, what are you listening to? He says, Rush Limbaugh is amazing. I'm like, okay. And over the years, like my personal, I've developed it a different way. And I wouldn't say that that's the station I turn to all the time. But let's just, no worries about that. It's not about politics. I swear to you, it's not. So 20 years later, I see this guy at the Y once in a while, because I go to the Y and he also goes to the Y. And the other day, and he knows that he and I are on the opposite side of many political issues, right? And anyway, so he pulls up next to me, and I'm getting out of my truck at the Y, and he's parked next to me. He gets out, he says, Father Mark, come here. And I go over and he says, listen up, listen who's on the radio. Of course, it's this guy, right? And Earl Rushbo, and he says, oh, he's the best. Oh my gosh. I love this guy. He's just trying to get me, right? And my first response was to get in an argument. But I said, yeah, he's very good. You're right. And he said, I think he's the best, smartest guy ever. And I said, yeah, well, okay, And he says, I think he's smarter than Ben Franklin. And at that moment, I had to say something, but I didn't. I just said, well, yes, I'm glad you like him. And I went in and worked out. Now, the point is not about politics or radios. The point is I learned a lesson. And I got a chance to exercise it. And I feel darn good about myself. I really do. So I'm saying you can practice restraint and you can hold your tongue. And this week, I would offer you a challenge. Don't add fuel to any fires this week. Right? Don't poison your relationships with unnecessary, unkind, and unchristian speech. Because you speak from who you are, but who you are can change, and you can become less confrontational. And I think the world is a better place that way. Okay, let me finish up with this. The third thing that James says is that church, and especially those who speak with authority in the church, have a special and particular obligation to be truthful. He says, not many of you should become teachers, my brothers and sisters, for you know that we who teach will be judged with greater strictness. Now, I struggled with this idea that teachers are held to a higher standard than others until it struck me that a teacher does what? A teacher speaks to students. And students take what the teacher says and they go out in the world and they say those same words and they believe those same things. And so it occurred to me that a teacher has a particular and special obligation to be truthful because otherwise 10 people go out from that class and they go talk to 10 more people and 10 more people, and the effect of that one speech or lesson is exponentially multiplied. And so imagine if the teacher is teaching falsehood, how that gets out into the world as more and more falsehood. Right? And so about church, like I don't care what people, I don't care who you vote for or what you do. That's all your business. But church I care deeply about. And so it's incumbent on those of us who teach in church to teach the truth, I believe. The church has a real stake in this. I want to tell you, I want to finish with this story about a woman that I met this week. She's 14 years old. And she has her grandmother brought her in, asked if she could come and meet with me, and then brought her. She has a loose affiliation with this church through her grandmother and grandmother's family. And she'd been struggling in her life and wanted to know if she could talk to someone. So I said, yeah, I'm not a counselor, but I'm a pastoral caregiver. I can meet with her 3 times, and then if it doesn't, if she needs more counseling, then we'll get to a professional counselor. That's what we do. So we got to talking, and here's this really bright young person, very bright, and just a good-hearted person, it seems to me. But she seems lost. And it seems as though she's made some choices in her life that she now regrets. And it also seems clear to me that unless something changes for her, she's going to make a lot more choices that are going to take her in some bad places. But anyway, she asked me all these great questions about God. Why did God this and why God that? And as we're talking, she says, well, here's what happened to me. She said, 2 years ago, a friend of mine was in school, middle school, and she was transgendered, this friend. And she was openly transgendered, and she was bullied in school. Bullied so much with words now, you guys. With words and actions, but I'm not talking about getting beat up. I'm talking about somebody being ostracized and put down and beaten by words, bullied. So much so that this young child, this transgendered woman, killed herself. Young girl, I'd say. Hung herself here in Scottsbluff. And so the question that my young friend had, this 14-year-old had, was, why would God make someone go to hell? Why does God make somebody go to hell for suicide? And I said, who told you this? She said, well, that's what they say. That's what the Christians say. My Christian friends have told me that my friend is now in hell because she took her own life. And I said, that's nonsense. I said, that's garbage. Nobody believes it. The Bible doesn't teach it. It's not true. And I think that is a stark example of how teachers in the church have got to take seriously this idea that what we teach has vast and great implications, because this young woman may in fact go her whole life resenting God and the church and may never have a chance to know God in a real way because she's never set foot in a church. in my office was the first time she'd ever been in a church. And she may never know God because of what someone told her about who God was that was a lie. See what I'm saying? So James says, gotta tell the truth, teachers. And so I'm saying, church, be church. Speak church. Go out and tell the truth to people. So here's the deal. Who's in charge? You or your tongue? Does it need to be said? Who is listening to what you say, and what impact will your words have? And ask yourself this question. Is anybody better off for having heard those words? James calls us to be church, to spread the gospel, which is a message of hope and love. And here's the point. If our words aren't of the gospel, in other words, if our words aren't either hopeful or loving, maybe they don't need to be said at all.